What's up, y'all? Shane G. We back with another episode of Politics as usual, right here on the Ethos Media Network. Make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe as always for all the latest content. Today we're going to be reacting to another video from a guy I definitely like watching his compilations, Matt Orfala. Definitely check him out on YouTube. We're going to look at he does a really good job of basically exposing hypocrisy. What I like to try to do on this channel, except he does it in a way where there's no denying it. He pretty much does it to where if you've ever said anything and then you've said the opposite, he's got you on tape. So we're just going to check out here another video about Ukraine, the Russia versus America situation, what NATO really had to do with it, because a lot of people feel like Putin just up and decided one day to just invade Ukraine for no reason or purely because he's just evil and that's what he does, so I've been trying to dispel that. Again, I'm not necessarily cool with what Putin did, you know what I mean, invading Ukraine and all of that kind of stuff, but again, if you have somebody that dislikes you and they are constantly driving by your house and you tell them, hey, stop, I'm taking that as a threat and I'm going to take action if you keep pulling up on my house, and they keep doing it. And eventually, they go from sitting in front of your house to sitting in your driveway. And then they go from sitting in your driveway to sitting on your yard. Eventually your warning that you gave them might happen. So again, for those who don't know, basically the whole reason that Russia invaded Ukraine is because NATO continued to push up against their borders after, there was an agreement that we would not do that. And we just kept doing it anyway. And, we're trying to essentially use Ukraine for our purposes without actually bringing them into NATO. And while we're doing that, essentially, that's hurting Russia. So we're going to get into it, though. Let's watch the clip and let's enjoy.
President Putin actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. Mm-hmm. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course.
Okay, so immediately he said, if you don't have Ukraine join NATO, we won't invade. Okay, so we got that established. That's the head of NATO who's saying this.
We didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO close to his borders.
Flashback.
This is fundamentally not about NATO expansion.
It was never about NATO enlargement.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO expanding toward Russia.
This was never about NATO.
It's absolutely nothing to do with NATO expansionism.
And it has nothing to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with it. Even though you just heard, before all of these clips, you just heard the head of NATO saying, no, the whole reason they're doing this is because they said we shouldn't be expanding towards them and we don't want Ukraine a part of NATO. Again, NATO is a military alliance. Let's just keep that in mind. That's a military alliance. So basically, if somebody in NATO goes to war, everybody else in NATO follows suit.
It's not about NATO.
It's not really about NATO.
This is not about NATO.
Not really.
Seriously, it's not about NATO.
This was never about NATO.
It was never about NATO.
Anna.
Let's be honest.
This doesn't have anything to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO at all.
Yeah, he's claiming it's like security purposes.
Come on, Jane. Come on, Anna.
The reason.
But NATO is not the reason.
This is not about NATO expansion.
Not about
this
NATO.
Is about democratic expansion.
Ukraine.
It's about democratic expansion, he says. It's not about NATO. It's about democratic expansion. Those are his words. But then we see that Ukraine is banning certain religions. Very democratic.
We are protecting democracy right now.
Ukraine is banning political parties.
Because it's a democracy.
Ukraine restricts books and music.
It's about democracy.
Ukraine won't hold elections.
It's about democracy.
And it's not about NATO expansion.
This war in Ukraine is not about NATO.
Not about NATO.
That's not about NATO.
It has nothing to do with NATO.
Nothing
to do with
NATO expansion.
It's not about NATO expansion.
Nothing to do with
This is amazing. This is amazing. This is literally amazing. Wow. This is why I love Matt Orfala's videos. Again, make sure you subscribe to his channel. This is why I love his videos. Just the pure amount of exposing he does. It just makes me happy.
NATO. It isn't really about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO enlargement.
In fact, it has nothing to do with NATO.
It's not about NATO encroaching.
It's not about NATO. NATO is just a fictitious, imaginary adversary for Mr. Putin and for Russia.
It was never about NATO.
That's not what it's been.
He says NATO is a fictional, made-up adversary for Putin and Russia. What's the purpose of NATO again? If that's the case, why isn't Russia in NATO? Why'd the pipeline get blown up when one of our allies, Germany, was about to do a lot of business in the energy sector with Russia, which is why the pipeline got blown up? NATO's in no way. You know, the original Minsk Accords, the reason why those got squashed was because of the United States and NATO telling Ukraine not to be on board with that. You guys understand that? Like, there was a peace deal earlier this year that the United States and NATO told Ukraine, no, don't agree to that. The war could have been over already. And the only thing that that Russia wants is two things. One, they want Ukraine to not be involved with NATO. And two, they want all of the Russian-speaking and ethnic Russians in the Donbass region who have been getting shelled since 2014 at the behest of, you guessed it, the United States, NATO, and a Nazi battalion called the Azov Battalion that's still very much part of Ukraine's military. Those are the three things that they want. They want Ukraine to not be part of NATO. They want the Donbass to essentially... They want the Donbass. They're like, yo, just give us that back because everybody there is Russian ethnically. And you're shelling them. And it's basically an open air prison at this point. Like, and you've killed, I want to say 14,000 residents of this area. Ukraine killed 14,000 residents of this area. So, yeah. To say that it's a made up thing, when we are literally the only reason that this war is still going on, is just insane.
It's been about him trying to expand his sphere of influence.
Hang on, I mean, the two are not mutually exclusive. Obviously, Russia has wished for a sphere of influence over Ukraine, but if the West had not challenged Russian interests so directly, I think that there was a chance to avoid this war.
Okay.
He wanted us to sign a promise never to enlarge NATO. We rejected that.
The reason why Putin invaded Ukraine is because of his evil.
It's about that Putin wants to rebuild Soviet empire of evil, like President Reagan told.
It's about Putin being sick.
I don't know how you negotiate peace with a madman, but
Nobody negotiated with Hitler.
people are comparing him to Hitler.
Hitler.
And remember, Hitler.
He's a Hitler.
We're back when the Nazis invaded Poland.
This is exactly the same. What Hitler was doing to Jews.
This is the same.
Wow.
Putin will not stop.
Putin is reminiscent of Hitler.
Hitler.
This reminds me of Hitler.
Hitler. He's the new Hitler.
Well, Hitler.
This is about a butcher. I'm trying to kill people.
He's the new Hitler. Let's compare body counts. Let's compare Putin's body count to Barack Obama's body count. Let's compare Putin's body count to George Bush's body count. Let's compare Putin's body count to Donald Trump's body count. Let's compare Putin's body count to Joe Biden's just in this term, not including his vice presidency or any of the Senate shit he voted for. I am willing to bet, without looking any of those statistics up, that Putin's numbers are either very close or less than ours. So, first of all, just comparing him to Hitler is just as ridiculous, in my opinion, as when people were comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, or when people, on the right wing were comparing Barack Obama to Hitler. Like, there is no Hitler but Hitler. So let's just get that out the way. 2, it's really funny that all of these people are using the Hitler comparison when, rewinding back a few moments, you'll remember I said that the Azov Battalion, who's part of Ukraine, not Russia, they're part of Ukraine's military. They're part of they're one of the groups that helped bring that coup in 2014, in which their democratically elected president was replaced by somebody that NATO and the United States wanted to be president. Again, if you watch a video I did on Ro Khanna a few months back, you'll remember that Ro Khanna in 2015, I believe it was, said that he will never support sending money to Ukraine because of the Azov Battalion, who are Nazis, literal Nazis. They do the Sieg Heil salute. They have swastikas tattooed on themselves, all of that. If that's the case, what changed in 8 years? 6 years? Are we thinking that they got rid of all the Nazis out of the Ukraine military? I hope that's not what you're implying. Are we implying because the president is Jewish that therefore Nazis cannot be in the military? That's like saying because we had a black president that there can no longer be any racists in the United States military. We know that's not true. So again, how much more evil is Putin than any United States president? Forget the Hitler thing. Let's go straight to the United States president. How many presidents is he equal or worse than, would be my question. Leave comments. Feel free. The second thing, he's just doing it because he's evil. That's it. He's just a psychopath. He's just an evil madman, and he just likes violence. That's what they all just said. He's doing this just because he's evil. He just wants to expand the evil Russian empire. Well, how many military bases does Russia have around the world? I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that the United States has at least 800. So which empire is really trying to take over the world? We don't have 800 enemies. Most of our military budget, most of our bases and things like that there's a lot they're just in random places. There's a bunch in Africa. There's a bunch in the Middle East. Like, we don't even know where a lot of them are, but there's over 800 of them. Who's really trying to take over the world? That's my question. Is it Vladimir Putin by saying, Ukraine, chill on killing all the Russians in your country and don't join NATO, or we're coming? Or is it he's just an evil psychopath who has no rhyme or reason for his actions whatsoever, and he just randomly one day up and decided to invade Ukraine? You tell me.
Everywhere in the world, just not Ukraine, Syria, all over the place.
I hear you.
It's amazing that he brings up Syria. Like, we aren't currently helping Saudi, well, not anymore, I guess, because Syria and they're on more, they're back part of the Arab Council, I believe it's called. I could be mistaken on that, but there's a group of Arab countries basically who all function together, and Syria was not part of that for a long time. And just this year they reached a peace agreement to where Syrians are allowed in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabians can freely go to Syria. There's not an active war going on anymore. So, but again, we were funding the Saudi side of that war. So, or we were contributing to it. I'm not going to say we were necessarily all the way funding it, but we were greatly contributing to the Saudi side when they were committing a genocide in Syria. So it's really funny for Lindsey Graham, of all people, to bring up, first of all, him acting like anybody else is a psychopath or a war bloodthirsty criminal maniac type of dude is hilarious, because Lindsey Graham has never met a war that he didn't like. He votes for every war. Any sort of offensive military action, Lindsey Graham is for it. You can check his record. All of them. So for him to bring up Syria is just hilarious to me. It's the height of irony.
Senator Lindsey Graham, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, straight ahead.
All right. So check out Orf. Definitely check out our guy Orf. But yeah, man. So that's what's going on. Basically, the media is going to be lying to you at every step of the way when it comes to anything big. Anything big. COVID, we found out a bunch of their lies. I still don't necessarily know what I'm allowed to say on YouTube regarding that, so I'm being careful about it right now. But, if you've seen my other videos, I think you kind of know where I stand on that. I feel like we were all lied to on a huge scale that's so severe that a lot of people still want to hold on to the lie. And I think a lot of it is because they might have, given somebody bad advice that didn't turn out good, and they don't want to blame themselves because they were only doing what they were told. I think that's a lot of it. So with all that being said, just be skeptical of anything big going on in the media. If they're talking about a war, they're probably not telling you the truth about why we're in that war. If they're talking about a huge bill that's going to get passed, if they're saying really anything positive about that bill and both sides seem happy about it and seem like they agree with it, look deeper. There's probably a giant screwing coming your way. And that's basically it. Just like I said, be careful what you read, be careful, what you see as far as in the news, especially when it comes from mainstream sources, because they have incentive to lie to you. Because these the military industrial complex, everybody who's making all this money off of all these wars, they are paying. Just pay attention to the commercials on the news that you watch. It's going to be a lot of Pfizer, who, obviously made a lot of money during this pandemic. It's going to be a lot of Boeing. It's going to be a lot of Raytheon. And who are these people? These are weapons manufacturers. So the weapons manufacturers are paying the media to be pro-war, so that way they get the public on board for war, so that way we can go to war, and then the military industrial complex continues to make money through the sale of weapons, technology, tanks, you name it. So that's where we're at. All I ask of people is remember 2002, and then remember 2005-ish, when we kind of found out that, those weapons of mass destruction didn't exist, and we actually really didn't have any real reason to go to Iraq other than finances. A lot of people got rich during that war. So this is Shane G. This is Politics as Usual right here on the Ethos Media Network. Once again, shout out to Matt Orfala. I believe at the end of that clip, I had all of his socials on there and everything. So definitely follow if you're not already. But until next time, this is Shane G. This is Politics as Usual right here on the Ethos Media Network. Catch you next time. Peace.